Streaming is live.
Alright, let's go.
Alright, is that good?
Yeah.
Alright, this is the Tech Collective and ACM Intro to Web Development. I am Jeff.
Hi, I'm Muhammad.
This is Muhammad.
And then also shout out to IEEE 754.
Alright, so why should you learn about web development? So web development is actually, or like web technology is everywhere. You see it in like YouTube, you see it in like, you know, Facebook. Every single like website that you ever go to uses web technology. I know, crazy. Well, that and like, yeah, it extends just beyond websites. So like a lot of stuff like Atom, Slack, Visual Studio, they kind of feel native, but they were actually just used with web technologies.
So with Slack, one of the reasons for that is they can get you the Windows version, they can get you the OS X version and the web version, and it all looks and feels the same because they're literally just giving you a website in an application. So if you actually do like Control R or Command R while in Slack, it will refresh as if you were on a website because it's just a website. You can try it now.
Yep. And it's kind of cool because like a lot of editors, I don't know if you guys have used like Cloud9, you can actually like program in an editor. I know, cloud technology. It's crazy. So let's move on.
Yeah, so a little bit of history. HTML originally was just supposed to be, we have some documents, the documents have links to other documents, cool. That was the entire purpose of HTML. It was meant for sort of these simple static websites, like you have a journal publication. The content is never supposed to really change, and the links are really just to reference other documents. As time went on, people started to do more dynamic pages and more dynamic content, and there was a little bit of a debate on whether or not web should be used for that purposes, though nowadays everyone sort of agrees that you could use the web more than just for content, that you have these applications, you can do your banking, you can do all of that. So it's gone far from the original scope, but the basic way HTML works is that all of these tags you write are interpreted by a browser and then parsed into the document object model, which is just this tree-like structure that says you have this tag, and within these tags are these tags, and within those are those, and you could kind of see how it's a tree. And the DOM, or the document object model, can be manipulated in real time by the browser, which is what JavaScript does. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why when you like build your HTML web page, you go like HTML, and then you have your header tags, and that's like that tree-like structure there. And cascading style sheets. So the whole point of CSS, so every time you do a descriptive like thing with HTML, like bold and like, you know, trying to like do colors and whatnot, before like this came in, you would have to do that. You'd have to like style it for every single one, right?
Yeah, it'd be every single page you'd have to copy the styles over and over, and you'd have to do it on a per element basis, which led companies to a problem saying we wanted to change the colors of our site, so now they have to change it on 20 different pages, and it became a nightmare. So this was sort of the solution to that.
Yeah, and then think about Amazon. If you had to do this for Amazon, like if your boss asked you, hey, I need you to change the color for every single web page, you'd have to do that for all like 1 million web pages. And there's also been like a lot of like flavors of like CSS. I know they've tried to like redo CSS.
They've redone it a couple times.
Yeah, there's also like
there's CSS4 coming out, which is actually pretty cool, but
yeah,
that's not here yet.
Yeah, and then the thing about this isn't really a language, but like they've tried to make it more like a language, like using sass and like other stuff, but just know that this is just like used to describe, you know, how colors are. It just like tells the browser how to do styles.
And each browser does it differently, which can cause quite a lot of problems if you're Internet Explorer and don't know what a transparency is.
Yep. So it's like you have to keep doing the same work for about like every single browser.
And some styles are only recognized by certain. Oh, it's kind of a nightmare.
Certain vendors. Then you have to do it for mobile. Then you have to do it for mobile, and it's crazy. So next up,
JavaScript. JavaScript is oh boy. So the original version was created in 10 days, as all good programs are. That is actually not a joke. It was created in 10 days, the first version, and it's a little bit weird. So basically, it was supposed to just be this DOM manipulation. In the original version, you had document.write, and you would write text onto the screen. And everyone's like, that's great, but I have HTML, so why would I need it? And JavaScript sort of went under the radar for years, even though every browser had it, because it was so simple to implement. everyone was like, we could use Flash for these like native dynamic applications, and then Flash sort of tanked. Google was one of the few that were really pushing for JavaScript, and they showed Google Maps, and everyone was like, wow, you can actually do cool things with this. And it sort of exploded from there. So that's kind of why JavaScript's everywhere, and it's very bad at math, let's say that. And it's not too clear, but it is a full programming language. It's not HTML. It doesn't describe styles. You can use it to write programs and applications. Hello. So in JavaScript, if you look at that second line, that is equal to 9. Does anybody know why? That is actually valid JavaScript syntax, which is incredible.
That's a G.
You'll find out later today. It's really bad at math because it implements something called the IEEE 754 floating point standard, which is a long way to say that we don't know how to do math. 0.1 plus 0.2 is not equal to 0.3. It's 0.300000004 because it doesn't make a distinction between int and float and double. It just has one number, and that can cause problems. But there's something called JSON, which is just a way to represent objects. And that is pretty cool, and a lot of things started implementing that recently, including C# now has a native JSON parser, and that all came from JavaScript. To summarize.
Yeah, so like, if you guys don't know what JSON is, if you guys have used Python, it's kind of like a dictionary. So like an object, then like you can specify, like, let's say you have like a title, you can specify that in like dictionary title with like the character, and then you can get the value from that. And it makes everything really, really quick to implement. So like if I sent you data, you can easily get it, like from a with a snap of a finger. And like, so again, like when Mo was talking about the DOM, so imagine like you can see like the body tag and like the paragraph tag. You can write inside that, and you can like write with like a click of a button. You can just like put new content in there. So a lot of like the live features that you see, like the interactivity, comes from JavaScript. And
JavaScript is suffering. It really is. We'll get into that later, but just know that a lot of web developers hate it, and then they realize it's a necessary evil, and we're just kind of stuck with it for now. It can do cool things like render an entire operating system in the browser, and then in that you could go into a different browser and render another operating system. So you could have an operating system rendering a browser in an operating system rendering a browser in your browser on your computer, which has that operating system. So that's possible, and the first time that was showed, literally every web developer started crying because they didn't want to do that. But you can, so yeah.
yeah, and there's so many scripts running on like every single, like, let's go back to Facebook. Facebook has a lot of scripts running at the same time, all trying to update objects, all trying to update your feed. So like when you get a message, how do you get that?
Or if you ever seen anything like an infinite loader where you scroll down the page and then it loads more content, that's JavaScript also.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest features. And let's go into some more web design. So here I just put down some 3, material design, flat design, and realistic. We've actually like moved away from realistic. So as you can see, the middle icon was the old Safari logo. It's more realistic. Flat design is like Metro. And the difference between like flat and material design would be like, you can see like the Safari on the left, it's flat, but versus the one on the right, the Twitter icon, you can see that material design has sort of a 3D element to it. So that's the real difference between material design and flat design. And when you're implementing websites, this is kind of like what's hot right now. So you can read their whole, they have like a 20-page article on this, on like what their paradigms are on material design and what the paradigms of like flat design are. And like Metro, I know, the Windows operating system, it's called like Metro. It's all flat, and it's a huge like jump from what we used to have. Now we're going to talk about HTML and styling. So everything around the web is based around this idea of boxes. So as you see, there's a margin, a border, and a padding, and then you have content in the center. So every single thing that you see, I'm going to go to the next slide. So like on my Facebook page, I'm using Facebook a lot, you can see that you have like that icon up there. So let me just move. Okay, there we go. So this whole thing is like a box. Then you have content, which is like the lettering, and you also have this content, which is this image. And you can see like right here, you can like move it around in the padding, so like that's moving the content up and down and like left and right within the box. And then you can also move margins, so it's moving the whole box maybe up and down. And you'll actually like you'll when you start designing web pages, you're gonna get a feel for this, and you can kind of understand like, oh hey, this is actually like how you manipulate things and how you move it around the website.
And one of the cool things with that is, let's say you're at a news site and you're scrolling down reading the article and a little message blocks the entire screen saying you need a login to pay. You can actually just go in, manipulate the DOM, and get rid of that and continue reading the article.
Yeah, which is a very useful trick.
This is kind of how ad blockers work. They look for very specific content in the DOM and they just get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, and then sites started getting smart and trying to find ways around that, and there's kind of a cold war going on between the two. It's really fascinating, but that's a different topic.
Yeah. Also like that, the ad blocker acquisition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's ad blockers for ad.
Ad blocker for ad blocker. Yeah, so let's actually go into how do you actually build a cool site? Bougie font and a trendy color scheme. It's really all you need. I don't know, Mo, do you have any tips?
I mean, just like Comic Sans is really good. Papyrus font, if you don't like that, kind of maybe use both.
If you guys are into like, music on play, you guys can just embed one of those what those sorority sites have with just like you know what I'm talking about, right? The MP3 players that's just like we're gonna go back to the back to the 2000s.
I found one on the Twitter yesterday and I was like, holy shit. Why is this on Twitter?
Yeah, it's funny. And then you can also like add the like the cursor, so you can have like a sparkle on the cursor.
So the funny thing is, a lot of those features were in old HTML, and then when HTML5 came out, they were like, no, we need to get rid of some of this.
Yeah.
So from the original HTML version implemented 18 tags, and only 11 of those are still around. I don't actually know what the exact 7 were, but there was like a marquee tag, which allows your text to scroll like a marquee. They got rid of that. HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript 5, I guess. I don't know what version we're on. We're on like ECMAScript 8 or something. But all of the recent standardization, which happened sort of this decade, was done because websites were awful. They were inconsistent. They were doing all these terrible, terrible things. And people were running into issues of, I want to put a video on my page. There's no video tag. There was no video tag. Now there is a native video tag that every browser, including Microsoft's, can render. But in the past, you had no video tag. So how did you put a video on your site in 2008? Well, that's where Flash came in, and then you had to do embed and o-embed and objects, and it was a nightmare. So this is ever changing. It's a living document. They're still... Mozilla's actually the one that's really been pushing forward with all of the standardization, and they have a full list of these are the features we're recommending, these are the features that are going to come. There's something called the W3 Coalition, which is the World Wide Web Coalition, and they're also saying here are the standards of what we need the browsers to do, and not every browser conforms to that. Many do now. I remember the first time we had phones that could go online, they introduced a tag for a phone number, and no browser knew what to do when you clicked that. So you'd be like, here's a tag just for phone numbers. And now mobile browsers, they're like, we know we could take that and we could just call them. So it's still evolving. Not every tag's implemented, but...
It used to be worse.
It used to be a lot worse. Email actually is still that bad. Email has not really progressed. Email currently is at the point websites were 10 years ago, so...
Yeah, like every single email renders everything differently. And we're pretty lucky now, like Mozilla, whenever you Google something, like you can go MDN and they do show like what's supported, what's not. And before, just imagine when like just making a website, you display something in the center and it would never be centered because that browser implemented it differently. Just like, oh my god. Well, so now we're gonna do some cool sites. Let's get the juices flowing, design juices. So, oh god. Let's go incognito.
Nobody will track us now.
Nobody will see us. Space Jam?
Space Jam. Great
Space
site.
Jam.
This is a great old site that is completely archived. This is what WebDev was 10 years ago. Actually, more than 10 years ago. Wow, I'm old.
Yeah, it's also pretty cool because...
Look, they have a background and text you can't read on the background. Notice how it's much thinner because you didn't really have HD back then.
Yeah, let's see the lineup.
Oh, man. Oh, beautiful.
Now, this used to be like a really cool site back in the day.
Yeah, like when this came out, people were like, "This is a game changer."
Yeah.
Like I remember, because
Yeah.
they're like you could click the image at different parts of the image and go different places. Oh my gosh.
Where's the actual like? Let's see, the Junior Jam. Oh
yes.
god.
Oh,
And then do you see
yes.
this GIF right here? You can click it. It's the most amazing thing. All right, so let's go to
Let's go to a real website.
Let's go to a real website. So this is what HTML can do for you. Do you see this like live like animations? Oh boy. Oh, notifications. Yeah. So you can see like they have actual like native like it's called Canvas, and you can actually just draw things and animate stuff. All right. It's enough, Facebook. Yeah. And you can do a lot of cool things. This guy, let's see. I visited this. You can see like WebGL. Yeah, have you used this?
I've used stuff like this before for the Metro. The Metro API is pretty garbage, but you can do some pretty cool things.
Yeah, and you can also look at this guy's interactive resume. So I know, do you think this is like done in Dreamweaver or something where you can just like interact with stuff?
I'd recommend not using Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
It's like the free version.
That's good.
Yeah, so
Composer's fine.
we've gone a long way from this. Not really. Some sites I still do that.
I mean, honestly, this site's great. It'll work. It works in all browsers, except phones. Should I share mine?
Yeah, do you want to share?
Why not?
Okay.
So here's
Now-
a sort of JavaScript-y example of something I made for a client.
Apologize for all this people streaming right now.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to see this one. Our HDMI ports are in different parts of the computer. You want to move your laptop further? Okay, cool. So this is something I made for a client that has a bunch of election data. So when you click on a year, you see the maps updating in real time, and that's just JavaScript. There's data stored in JavaScript in JSON format, and it knows how to pull it. So you could sort of see that. Let's click on a state. So when you click on a state, you notice each state has hover states, and I can just move around. This is updating also, because on mobile phones, it would be very hard to hit New Jersey. So you could actually see it's pulling in the data for who was running, how many votes did they get, popular vote information. This might be depressing some people given recent results, so I apologize. The one interesting thing that I always found with this tool I made, and a client paid me for this, but if you actually look at Virginia, where people were saying was very close, take a look at that number, 45%. Take a look at that number. Like, in most states, he did much worse than, look at that number. That's much, much higher. So this is one of the things that JavaScript can do for you, and it's just updating sort of real-time, very interesting application. I really enjoyed making that. The client's actually been saying, can you go back all the way to the start of America? I'm like, yeah, sure. They just have to give me the data, but yeah. So this is something you could make with JavaScript. It's not that difficult if you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, but it's pretty cool. And then, I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked in a terminal. Can you see that? Is that too small? Let me just make that bigger. How's that? Is that better? All right, so I'm in Node, which is just a JavaScript sort of terminal console thing. So we were talking about JSON format earlier. That's JSON format, that's an object. It's an object with a variable A in it, and that key corresponds to 4. And you could have objects within objects, so that's pretty neat. The earlier example that I gave of this, equaling 9, this is valid JavaScript also. If I see you code like this, I will be very disappointed in you. So the reason that's working is this is an array, that's a blank array, this is a blank object. That's an object, and then if you do type of array, it should be an array, which clearly it is. And yeah, that makes sense too. No, not that one. I think it's one more 9. I need 2 more 9s. 1 second, you'll see. There we go. Magically increasing numbers. So this is an array, but you can cast it to an integer. You could also cast it to a bool. So then what happens if I take these and add them. Oh, that's a string now. That makes sense. So, oh, that's true. Cool. What about this? That's false. Well, let's just cast that. That's 0. So what happens if I add true as a string and false as a bool, or 0, I guess in this case? Oh, true, false, and that's why it's equal to 9 when you get the length of it. In addition, it doesn't matter the order you add things in. So clearly, these two are equal to the same thing. Oh, they are. They fixed it. Yes. That used to not be equal to the same thing, which is kind of amazing. Anyway, that's just some of the horrors of JavaScript. But it can do cool things. Like, if you don't do that, you can get some great results.
Yeah, imagine debugging something like that. Like you're in a large JavaScript application, like 10,000 lines of code, and then someone just did this.
No, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, cool. Not a number. Does that work? Oh, that's technically true. Okay, cool. Anyway, if you mess around in the console, you'll discover horrible, horrible things. But you can make cool things with it.
All right, let's get back to the slides.
Apologies for the stream people who did not see that.
Yep. All right, so, Chris, is it back? Okay. So, now, how do you actually build a website? You can use a text editor, an IDE, like Illustrator, like I guess like an image generation. I mean, you could also use math if you wanted to. So you could just like create functions to make all of your images. Isn't that what LaTeX did? Or
yeah,
you can make your own fonts.
Images can also be written as code. Don't. Is my advice. But
Yeah.
you technically could go in and just like define in code, here's the structure of the image. It's useful if you actually want to transfer an image from one person to another, that you could take the image, encode it into a string, and then send the string over, since browsers are very good at sending strings to one another.
Yeah. So, let's get building. Make sure you know Google's your friend. I don't know, when I make a website and I need to like understand tags, I'll usually Google like MDN, so the Mozilla Developer Network, and then just whatever tag I need, and then they show me all the options, all the styles you can do with it.
I'd avoid W3 schools if you've ever seen that link. It's very, very top level and doesn't really get into the specifics as much as MDN does. If you are sort of developer-minded and want to view websites as more than just here's a page with content and want to view it more as an engineering process, use MDN.
Yeah, and a lot of these things like Bootstrap, if you guys have heard of them, like Bootstrap, they're all based on this model right here, just like boxes and just CSS.
And suffering with JavaScript.
Yeah, suffering with JavaScript. A lot of suffering. It's a lot of suffering. Did you tell your story about the Trump thing?
Okay.
You promised that.
Okay, so my promise to Jeff was there was a time at work I accidentally took down Donald Trump's website with a line of JavaScript unintentionally. And then also took down like a bunch of other sites. So basically, he was
Allegedly.
No, not allegedly.
Oh, okay.
He was using a library from GitHub, where instead of just copying and saving the source into his JavaScript, his staff for some reason directly referenced the file unversioned, which means if you did a pull request and the code changed, you would have the change reflected live on the site. So if you go in and set it to window.location equals hillaryclinton.com, and then the pull request is accepted, yeah, that would happen. But what happened with taking the site down was on April 1st, 4chan/anonymous had their old Let's DDoS Donald Trump. Donald Trump site's built on a service called Nation Builder, which is located in LA but also has offices in Chinatown here. And Nation Builder previously was used only by Democratic Party officials. So unintentionally, when they were DDoSing Donald Trump's site, they were also DDoSing some sites I was working on and a bunch of sites for Democrats. And that's when I found out Donald Trump's site was on the same server that my sites were on. And then fun things happened because their infrastructure is really bad and you could just sort of snoop around the files. Whenever you give me a website, I try to break it, which is bad because, well, I mean, I took down Wendy Long's website for like an hour. She was running in New York. Her login into the backend was password.
Wait, what?
And then the security mechanism kicked in, so at least they had that. And then instead of just preventing me from getting access, they just took down the site. They're like, no. So if you deal with web security, it's fun.
Password.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of times the password is password, or for if they're like Republicans, the password tends to be like America 1776.
What?
It's like because they're not creative enough. But yeah,
Oh my god.
there's a certain point where some people just pay me saying to take down their website, and I'm like, first of all, your password is password, so it wasn't that hard. Yeah, web is important. A lot of infrastructure is built on web, and people say once it's on the internet, it's there forever. That is not true. Trust me, that's not true. You can actually lose things permanently if it's only in the cloud. If somebody malicious is trying to access things. So be careful. Don't have your passwords be password. I'd actually recommend if your passwords are shorter than 24 characters, you're doing something wrong. So, and if you reuse passwords, you're definitely doing something wrong.
America's 1775.
That
With a
actually would be a
3.
pretty good one.
All right. So let's get building. You guys have any ideas? Do you guys all bring laptops? All right. No.
Clearly.
Okay. Clearly. So Mo, do you want to build one together?
Sure.
All right.
Space Jam site still.
Space Jam site.
I mean, you could build this.
You want to build this? Let's build it from the ground up. Or do you just want to walk through this?
Yeah, okay. So, oh man, you could tell this was written a long time ago because there's no tabs at all in their source code. It's
God.
It's just straight HTML. Yeah, just view this page.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's just view this. Inspect.
I'd actually, instead of inspect, I'd go to the source. Yeah. Wow. Wow, I haven't. Bada bing, bada boom. Can you all see that? Let's just zoom in here. Yeah, perfect. So you could put comments, and sometimes this happens. 1996. This was 20 years ago, not 10. I'm old.
How old were you? Did you actually see this site as a kid?
Yeah.
When it first came out?
Yeah. I saw Space Jam when it first came out, man. So all websites sort of start with HTML tags. Actually, not nowadays. Now they start with a doc type declaration to say we're using HTML5. And so you have an HTML tag at the beginning. You could put comments. The comments could happen before the HTML tag. Then you have head and body. And head sort of defines the upper level information about the site. So you have a title.
Yeah,
and that's apparently the only thing that has.
You can also put scripts in there, so if you wanted to load stuff. Do you have a website up?
No.
Okay.
My website.
Let's go to a better website.
Yeah.
I don't know. Huffington Post.
Oh, that's a great photo.
All right. So
this is
this is
a much more modern example. Wow, their styles are just echoed. Why are their styles echoed? Why? Okay, I have some things against this. This one's different. So there's a doc type declaration, which is saying doc type HTML. Doc type HTML means we're using the latest HTML version, which is 5. Previously, if you were HTML4, you would reference a W3C document that says, hey, we're in HTML.
We're in the Stone Ages.
Yeah. You have head, and then you have these meta contents. Now, meta content is stuff that doesn't appear on the page, but other services use it. So this one's for Google site verification, which means Google's web crawler is going to look at this key, and Google's web crawler will then be able to confirm, yes, this belongs to Huffington Post. And that helps you get search engine optimization. It helps you appear in search results. This will be duplicated across all of their sites, of all of the Huffington Post sites. So if I were to take this and put it on my site, Google's going to see, do I actually own this account, and realize no, and then they're going to devalue my site. So Google has this thing called Google Analytics, which is just JavaScript that appears on basically every web page. It allows you to figure out who viewed your site from what, because if every single page is using the service, you could tell, well, a user went from this page to this other page by clicking this link. And you could tell what browser they were using, what language the site was in, all this other information, which from a marketing perspective is really nice.
Yeah, you can also get the real time, so how many people are on the site right now, what kind of traffic you have.
Yeah, you don't need to put these in your sites, but this is pretty cool because it's showing here are they have like
sites in different languages for different countries.
So if you're in France, because they can tell where you're coming from, they can redirect you to their French site.
including like the Quebec French site, so this is pretty cool. Then you have the title, Huffington Post. You have, this is something you probably should put, is the character set for your site is UTF-8. You could define other stuff. Almost certainly you want UTF-8.
Yeah, other characters. Yeah, there's a really cool article about UTF-8, like the time before it. So before when like characters weren't encoded that way.
Yeah.
So you can have like Thai characters or anything. People just like used English, which was cool at the time. And just like for reference, the title, when you have a tab, you remember when you saw the source code of Space Jam? Title Space Jam.
Yeah.
That's right up here. So whenever you set title, that's what it sets it to.
So that's also when you view, if you Google something and you see the title, that's the title.
Yeah.
So make sure those are set correctly. You don't need to worry about this. This is mostly for mobile. It's just to ensure we're using, I don't know why they're doing a manual width specification. The meta content description here is also used by Google. If you were to Google Huffington Post, you will actually see that there. So the destination for news, blogs, original content. Where is that? Oh, it's right here. That's what that is. You have some other, these OG tags are Open Graph, which is used by Facebook. So it's telling Facebook if I were to share this, that I'm sharing a website. If I were to be sharing like an application on the web, I would do something a bit differently. So we're going to kind of scroll past all of the meta because you don't need to worry about that.
And you can look at that if you just like go to just Google like meta tags, and you can see all the different types.
Here's their CSS. I don't know why they're doing it like this, but they decided just, instead of linking to a CSS file, they just put it all in, well, I do know why they're doing it, I just disagree with it.
Yeah, right?
It's just so that you don't make another call to load content. So CSS, this is without white space. CSS doesn't need it, but when you write it, you will use white space.
Yeah, so they probably minified this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
same
with the JavaScript, that critical desktop. Critical desktop, that's Ajax handler. And then you could see they're loading some fonts here, which are fonts they actually have stored on their site. You don't need to worry too much about the head tags, so don't, but this one's not minified for some reason. All right, now we can get to the actual website. Here's your body tag.
So most stuff in a website is done in the body tag. So everything you would see on the Huffington Post is inside a body tag. Yeah, let's go back.
Yep. So I actually think here would be a good time to open up the...
Look at that video. It's web technology.
Look at that video. Look at that waste of your bandwidth. Okay, let's close that. So I'm going to actually open up here and open it up to the side. There we go. Okay. Cool. So here, if you don't want to deal with like the lack of white space, this is kind of difficult to read. You can actually just view it through the inspector. So there's body, and then I can see when something's highlighting, oh, okay, that's where this content's located. Let's open that.
And this is the tree-like structure. This is the DOM.
Yeah, so there, oh, there's the header. You know, I don't want the header. Let's delete that. Cool. I mean, that only deletes it on your end. That does not delete it on their end, in case anyone's confused. That would be amazing.
Start deleting chunks.
Yeah. So you have an ad blocker on, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So you could see this is actually an advertisement, which isn't really showing up here. So we can get rid of that. And there's the footer. So here's main. You could see it has role main, and this is called the semantic web. So basically we're writing this divider saying the role of this is main. This is great for screen readers. Screen readers are going to ignore the header, they're going to ignore the footer, they're going to go straight to the main. So they can read your site out loud, and they can read the content of the site out loud. So that's pretty important for people who have a vision impairment. It allows them to get to your site. So let's go into the splash content. Okay, so you could see the orange outlines, those are margins. And if you see green, those are padding. And if you open this up, you can manipulate it.
So these are their CSS values, so you can really just like mess around. Yeah. So,
like, I can literally do whatever I want with this. The color, I'm assuming, is cascaded down. And that can be useful as well, just not for web dev, but if you want to make something more readable on a website, that you need the information, it's an old site, the background's annoying, like Space Jam. Like, it's like, oh god, I don't touch ads.
Yeah, isn't this how, what's it called? Yeah, disabled readers work, like the plugins? So the plugins will just go into the a website and just change the colors for you.
Like, oh man, I don't want to deal with this background image that's like hard coded. Let me get rid of that. Okay, that's a little easier to read. So you could do stuff like that as well. Once you go into this section, here you have the H1. So H1 is heading. There should really only be one H1 per page. You shouldn't have multiple. If you think about like an actual journal publication, you have one heading. And then you have the H2s, which are your subheadings, and then those might have subheadings, and that's H3, and you go all the way to H6. So if you were going to the original standard of when web was for academic papers, that's how you would do it. And this links, so you could see this is an anchor tag, and it links somewhere, and it has a URL that it goes to when I hover.
Yeah, and then there's a tag for this. It's like hover. So you do it's the class, and then you just like add a colon, and it's hover.
And then you could change the content also.
What is this page now?
I mean, now it's starting to look a little bit like Drudge Report. Oh, and Hillip doesn't want to appear there. Oh well, we'll just do Trump aside.
It's gonna be an intro to like the meme.
I mean, Drudge Report's site has not actually changed how it looks since it first came out, and it's one of the best looking websites. I don't mean that seriously. Where this one? So data attributes, you can define data attributes to be whatever you want. So I could do data beacon, data modal, data whatever. And in JavaScript, so I'm going to open up, where's your console?
Yeah, let's click it.
Okay, let's move the console up and let's clear that. Do they have jQuery? Yes, cool. So I'm on element 0 right now, right? Great. So if I were to say data beacon in JavaScript, I can actually grab that object. But that's only because the data is called beacon. So I could define data as whatever I want. And this is part of when you're making an application. You would define data tags as this is the data that is necessary. I think
So this is a piece of JavaScript.
yeah. It's in the DOM itself, but the JavaScript would access that.
Okay.
By itself, it doesn't do anything.
Okay.
But you could define, as long as it's data hyphen whatever, you could define whatever you want for that. I mean, technically, you could define like n equals 0. You could put any tag you want. It's just browsers are going to ignore it. If you do that too much, Google will get mad at you because they're like, your site's spam. So let's actually go to making a website now that we've sort of looked at one.
Sure. What did you
It's a really great picture.
use Adam? All right. So. Oh, I apologize. Yeah, my desktop is kind of.
Oh my god.
Yep, I apologize. So I'm gonna open this up here.
Give us the split screen.
Yeah, hold on. Yep.
So when we're talking about web servers and whatnot, you can run your HTML files locally. You could run your JavaScript locally, your CSS locally. If it's PHP or something more advanced, you would have to actually do a little more setup work.
So do you want to make a design right now? So let's have a title.
Okay.
Do it in Paint. So let's have a title up here. Okay. GWTC.
We have whiteboards.
Okay. No, but you can't see that on the live stream. Okay.
Is that a G?
This is a G.
It's like a fancy cake. Yeah.
Wait.
I mean, this is definitely how Walt Disney got his start. Oh, jeez.
Okay, there we go.
With
And
a
then-
bold G. Great.
Yeah, bold. And then
We'll just have like an image.
Our new
Yeah.
logo, Chris?
I want that on a
Put that on
t-shirt.
t-shirt.
yeah, then we're gonna have an image in the background. So I guess like a Bob Ross painting. Green. God. Okay. These are the color of mountains.
For a record, most web developers also don't do the design, they just do the implementation. So at my job, I don't make the designs. I just implement, which is great. I have somebody else I tell to make the designs for me. So
Okay.
I think, Jeff, you should apply for my company and just start this.
This is my portfolio. Hire me.
It's better than some of the ones we've gotten.
And then this is this is about us, and then we're gonna have some content. About, and then let's shrink the size. Text. All right. And then I guess a footer. I can never be a surgeon now.
Were you trying?
Yeah, of course. And then I guess Facebook.
We'll put some links there.
Yeah, we're gonna have some
So
links.
the first thing, when you come up with the design when making your website, my recommendation is you want to do the templating first. You don't want to worry yourself too much about the colors, about the styles. Just get the HTML template done first, and then do the CSS.
So you can see like each thing would be an object. This is like the header. Then you have like a div right here that would just be like some content. Then you have some more content down, and then you have a footer.
Yeah. So usually my process is HTML first. Well, I do PHP, so it would be HTML plus PHP and all. Anything backend, try to get the data, and then I'd worry about making it look pretty.
Okay.
And part of that is, at most companies where you're working at, there's usually a front-end developer who is good at making things look pretty. So if you're a back-end developer, don't even bother wasting your time with that. Just get what you need to get on the page. It's part of the idea of fast prototyping and getting sites out quickly so that you could churn out like 3 sites a week.
All right, so let's start.
Let's start.
HTML.
Do you want to make this bigger?
Oh, yeah.
So I would actually not start with HTML.
Okay.
So doc type HTML. This is how you're going to start. This is how you say it's an HTML5 page.
Okay. Now let's do the head.
Well, you got to put the HTML.
Oh my god. Okay, wait. There you go. HTML and the head.
Put the body also.
Get the structure.
Yep, there's your basic structure. So this is a web page. It's a very bad web page, but this is everything you need for a web page. You don't even need the head technically, but this is a web page. It will work in your browser.
Yeah.
It's your core template.
You want us to do like a title?
Yep.
Meta.
I'll just do a title.
Yeah. Oops. Title. Okay. And you can see when I... Oh, God. Oh, wait, yeah. You can see when we load this, this is locally, so you can see the title switched.
Yep.
That's more so.
And if you open up the inspector, you could see we have our code here. So other things you would define, let's put some comments for later. I like to do to-do comments if you're using Atom because then it like highlights it and it's easy to see you need to do something here. So a comment in HTML is just this, and then comment. So things we will do, we'll add a favicon. So when we have a favicon, it will show up here.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. And then another to-do that you can do is add styles. And I'm going to actually move the JavaScript to the footer, not in the header. You can define it in the header. I would not recommend it.
It doesn't make you... It makes it load faster, so it doesn't have to wait on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you ideally want to load the JavaScript after the rest of the website was loaded, so that's why you kind of dump it to the bottom of the body. But there might be critical JavaScript, like Google Analytics, that you would put in the head. But for our purposes, we'll keep the JavaScript down here. So this is kind of...
That's your base template. Let's go get the design that Jeff made and put it on our website.
Let's go look at this.
Oh,
Okay.
beautiful.
Alright, so I'm just going to do this with divs. So we're going to start with the GWTC. So GWTC style, and then you can do inline style. So with the CSS on a lot of the sites, you can like link it to another sheet, or you could just do it inlined. For now, I'm just going to do it inlined.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll move it from inline to the CSS in a little bit.
200 pixels. Height. 200 pixels. That's a bit. Alright.
That's fine.
Yep.
It doesn't need to look. I mean,
Style. Centered. Yeah, what's the code to center it?
text align.
Text align?
Yeah.
So the way CSS works is you write a style, and then you put a colon, and then you define what the style is. So it's kind of like a dictionary in a sense. It's just a bunch of key-val pairs.
I'm just gonna put it down here so I can align it within the thing.
Yep.
So. Yep, and then we can look at this in our inspector.
And you can see it has the width and height set there.
Yeah, so you can see our body is like that, and then our div is 200 pixels, so you can see like
That orange margin is there just to show that it's not going all the way across the screen.
you should probably do 100%.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So the reason why I put the div down here is because we have like a box, and then you have another text box underneath, so we can center it. Now let's go back to the design. Let's see. Height 300 pixels.
I'd worry about the styles later.
Okay. So got that.
So you have your sort of weird header area up there.
Yeah. So that would
We're
be
going to get
in
an
the
image
background.
now. So I guess find an image online. Let's just get a picture of Bob Ross.
Bob Ross Mountain.
Yeah.
Mount.
That has implications. No, that's fine.
It's a beautiful photo.
So we're going to, I would just copy the URL actually.
Okay.
So we're going to put an image tag.
Do you want to do it with the body? Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I'll get it. So an image tag is just img. And it doesn't close like the div tags because it's self-contained. And then you would specify a source for the image, and you could put this your local files where you'd reference it like image.jpg if it's saved locally, or you could just put a URL, which we're going to do there. And what you're going to notice, this image is quite large. It's not going to scale. When you load it, it's going to be huge. It's going to horizontally scroll, and that's fine. We will fix that in the CSS. We will set the sizes of that later.
Yep. And then below.
I don't know what's the next part of your design. Was it just the text?
Yeah, the about page.
Oh, the about.
Yeah. So let's just do another div. H2. About. Let's just put a paragraph. Some text.
Go to lorem ipsum, actually. So if you need, if you're making a site and there's content that you're waiting for, lorem ipsum's got your back. Yeah, generate that. This is the first paragraph. Because it will give you filler text. Lorem ipsum's kind of like the default web filler because it reads and looks kind of like English. So if you scroll down the page, like, it's not the correct text, but if you look at it from afar, you could confirm the design looks decent.
And then let's add it to do. Add links. Okay. Good.
There's our beautiful, beautiful website.
Let's see what it would look like in mobile.
On mobile, it would look exactly the same right now. So let's get some styles here. Is everyone up to this point? I'll open this larger.
Yeah.
So something, I'm going to actually get rid of these inline styles. And let's make this an H1. It's the header of the site anyway. So we're going to adjust some things here. We're going to make this a header tag. So header and head are different. Head is just the head of the document, but header is within the body. So that way, if a screen reader were to go...
Yeah, like a lot of the nav bars you see, like the hamburger menus would be in the header file.
And we'll change this to main. You could use divs, but we'll... This is the... So the div style is more of like the HTML4 approach. HTML5 introduced a bunch of these really nice tags. And this is really great for screen readers, especially because the screen reader will know, just go here. Go to the main tag. And you could even specify role equals main, just to make it extra clear this is where you need to go. All right, let's make a CSS file. Should I just save it?
Yeah, just save it there.
So we're going to call it CSS. Save it in the same folder. It's link rel equals
Dot slash.
dot slash. I guess you technically have to say it's a style sheet, but
Yeah. Oh yeah. What was the tag for that? Oh yeah.
type.
Text slash CSS.
So the first thing we're going to do here, in our style sheet, we want to make sure that the body, the main tag, is always at 100% width.
Yeah.
So we're going to do
So
that.
that means it takes up the whole like width. So like you don't want our website to be like kind of skewed just like 50% because you're not doing anything with that.
So note it's still
50%.
overflowing, but it is taking 100% width. And let's say we're going to go now to,
Do you want to remove the overflow?
no, we're good. Let's split this to the right. So now we could take a look at both at once, and we're going to just sort of go down. So we have a header, we have a main, and we have a footer.
Yeah, so this is just style. So instead of doing the inline styles, you can make it much neater and just put it in one main style sheet. The nice thing with this is that you can keep reusing it. And if you did have like a million websites or a million web pages, then if you just changed one style in this sheet, it would change it across all your sheets.
So for the header, it kind of looked like it was in a box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to make this...
We're going to just change the width.
We're going to change the width of the header. We don't want it to take the full 100%. We want the header to be 75%. And let's give it a background color. Let's make it red.
Yeah.
So you could do red, you could do the HTML, whatever, or the hex code, RGB.
Yeah.
You could actually do RGBA and define it this way if you really wanted to and give it like a transparency. You have a lot you can do with the styles alone. But notice that we keep the HTML simple and we do all of that in the styles. So for us, let's just make it red. And things are going to look weird. Is it
Oh, you have to save it.
Did I save it? Did I actually link it correctly? I think I probably didn't. Did I link it correctly?
Isn't that how you link? Just want to do the MDN.
MDN. So if you get confused, MDN. I definitely thought I did that correctly though.
Yeah, because you.
I'm an idiot.
Oh, it's href.
Yeah. I get rel and href mixed up all the time. Cool.
You deleted. Didn't you delete the styles? Oh, no.
No. Oh, it's private browsing. Yeah, 1 second. I never
Oh, yeah,
set
type.
this stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of this is just like you write this once and you never touch it again, and you just keep reusing the same templates. You do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless this path is
Just weird.
weird, which might be the case. Okay,
No.
cool. We're good. It's cool. So you might notice, well, okay, there's a few things weird with this page right now. There's like this weird margin padding thing going on here because web pages by default add it. There's a few. You notice you might want this box centered.
It's also actually you can see it's actually 75% too.
So let's take off the margins on the main body, and that way it's going to touch this edge. And if you're wondering what's going up here, it's actually the H1 tag. So because each browser slightly does this differently, there is a style sheet called the HTML reset style sheet that a lot of production sites use, which have the explicit purpose of just making everything the same across websites. So making sure that H1s have the same padding, all of that.
Yeah.
We don't need to worry too much about that. So how would I center this box? Anybody have ideas?
Now my approach is like
Use the center.
So let's see what happens there.
That's not gonna work.
Yep.
centers the text.
It centers the text. How do you center the box?
Through a center.
So it's actually based on margin. And that also moved the image with it. Let's move the image out of the,
header tag.
yeah,
Let's put it in.
let's just put it here. Cool. So that centers it.
It's beautiful.
So the reason for margin is we specify the vertical margins as 0, and then we say the horizontal margins automatic. And the reason for that is so that it would stay sort of centered and stay within 75%, regardless of the view port size. So that's the header. Was there anything else we wanted to do with that?
Let's see.
Did we want to make it more of a box?
Let's see. Yeah, let's make it more of a box, and then we're gonna increase the size of the
Okay, cool.
text. Yep. So font dash size. This is font dash size.
Yep.
Font dash size. Should I use? I'm just gonna use pixels. There are other what's it called? Like units. I know they have rem, em, and
Yeah.
like vertical width, height.
Yeah, there's ways to do it so that depending on the size of your browser window that the font size changes automatically. Like you can make it huge and make it 20 view height.
Right.
Try resizing the browser when you do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, notice how the size is now changing relative to the browser?
Yeah, relative to the height. And if vertical height and vertical width. So vertical height is if the height is smaller, then it changes according to that. So 10, the units in vertical height run like 0 to 100, so like 0 to 100%. For now, I'm just going to leave it on pixels.
Yeah, keep it simple. Cool. Let's
Um,
go to the main. So the big issue we're having is this image is
Massive.
overflowing and it's massive. So, oh, we're using CSS, not less. Okay. So if you were using less or sass, you could do this, but that isn't valid CSS. So we have to do something a bit different. So this is saying we're going to look in the main tag and then we're going to find any images in the main tag.
And this is really useful if you have a ton of images everywhere. So let's say we had an image in the header and then an image in the in the main. Our CSS would only be applied to the one in the main.
Yeah, so image by itself will get all images, but main image is only going to get the images within main. And then you have a few tricks like this, which would be images directly in main. So if I put this image in P, it wouldn't apply to it. And then you have like first child, and you can get really complicated with it. I mean, you can do stuff like you can get really complicated with some of the selectors here. This is valid. You don't need to do that. So we're going to keep it simple, but you do have the flexibility to do that if you really, really wanted to. So main image, we're going to specify the width 100% and the height to be automatic. And that's going to keep the proportionality of the image. You don't want to have the image stretch or anything. And there you go, it's 100%, and if you change the size, cool. That might not be ideal, but hey.
Imagine on mobile.
So imagine on mobile it would actually be fine. Imagine on desktop, you're on HD, that's too much. How do you fix this? Well, you could specify a maximum width. I'm going to specify that to be 640 pixels. Now, a max width, it will still maintain the proportionality, but now we have a maximum width applied to it. So if I were to take this and... So now we have another issue, which we kind of want this to look nice.
Yeah, kind of want it to be centered.
Yeah, so that's where you'd go into main. We want all of main
Centered.
Yeah, so we can actually do something a bit similar to what we did with the header, except we're going to make it 80% margin 0 auto. And then for this image, we want that. Yeah, we want the image to stay centered. So that's almost there.
You want to put that in main?
I actually think the image also needs the margin. I'll put it in main actually.
Yeah, so a lot of this is just like trial and error. So I know whenever I'm developing a website, like a web page, you always want to keep testing. Oh, my mail.
It's gone now.
Okay.
Cool. So now it's starting to look a little better, but we don't want the paragraph text to be centered. So how do you do that? Well, you could do main P, and we're going to text align left that. Yay, we have a website.
Let's see what else was in our design.
We had our social links, and
Social links.
we also had the about. So actually, let's do something cool if we go back to here.
Okay.
What if we wanted this text to be atop the image? Like right now, this is like, oh, that's fine. You have things in these sort of block-like components. You have a text, you have an image, you have a text, you have more text. That's not really cool.
Did you do vertical line, or is that not?
Only in some cases. So what if we wanted to move like this text into this image? Things get a little complicated, but it is doable. So we're going to call a divider, and we're going to give it a class name. Let's move our stuff here. And we're going to call this, I guess, feature. So that won't actually change the styles at all, but we kind of coupled the image with the heading within this divider called feature. And then we can go into styling that.
So this is going to go into another component called like classes. So if you have reusable styles, so main, div, p, they can all share the same class, and whatever is whatever class is applied will be applied to or whatever CSS we define in our class can be applied to all of these. And this can be useful with JavaScript because you can add classes in on the fly.
So for an example of that, let's give this one class equals cooler paragraph. Paragraph. So we have this main p. So both of these p's will be text align left. But I want to make the cooler paragraph. I want to do something cooler with that. We're going to make it bold. Oh yeah. So if I were to move this into just p, it would affect both of them, but here it's affecting just the class. And you denote classes by having this period character. Classes are denoted by this, and if there are IDs, super hot. IDs are denoted by a hash sign.
Yeah. So IDs are meant to be unique identifiers.
Yeah, you could only have one element have an ID, a unique ID at any time. But classes can be shared. So, did I get the, did I save them? There it is. Cool. So I can reuse classes. So now, this is going to be red and bold. So you could see that the reason it's called cascading style sheets is that the styles sort of cascade atop one another. So this was having multiple different styles applied to it. It's having this text align, it's having the style defined for this ID, it's having the style defined for this class, all applied to it. And it's applied in order, and that's really important, because notice, I defined cooler paragraph after super hot. What happens if I changed the color here? Which would apply? So because IDs take precedence, this was given that value, but you should not do this, but you can. You could say this style is more important. That style is more important. It says, okay, give us that. Let's take a look at the tools here. You could actually see the order in which these were applied. When you look at here, you could see, okay, the blue style here was applied first, and then it got overwritten by this red style. So the Chrome debug tools are actually really useful to get you to that point. That you could look at it and it just say, this style I wrote, it's not showing up. Why? Look at the debug. Is it being overwritten by something? So that's one of the, I mean, Firefox and other browsers have this. Chrome does it the best.
Yeah, Chrome has an entire, they have a lot of developer tools for this.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Chrome's developer tools are by far the best, so you could sort of see how that's working. Let's get rid of that important because we don't care about it.
And this is why it's really important to keep your style simple, because if you have multiple people working on multiple style sheets, whoever was on the bottom of that style sheet being applied, you guys can like have a mess, like spaghetti code.
Yeah, you'll end up overwriting one another, and the solution is not to put importance everywhere. The solution needs to come from the design to avoid that scenario. It's sometimes unavoidable, but try to avoid it if you can. Let's go back to the main thing of getting this positioned. So feature image. There's something called position. Everything by default is sort of just positioned by how the browser wants it, but I can say I want this to be absolutely positioned. And I can specify where I want that to be located. And things are going to get weird. So I could do that. Yikes. That's not necessarily nice looking. So when you absolutely position something, it's positioned relative to its topmost, so it's positioned relative to the topmost parent that has a relative position applied to it. Because nothing has a relative position applied to it, it goes all the way to the top, which is why it's at the top like here. But notice we wrapped it inside this div called feature. So if I define this as relatively positioned, okay, that's a little bit better. It's now positioned relative to this. Still not ideal, but hey.
Yeah.
We actually don't want the image to be positioned relatively. We wanted the text to be positioned. So now the image is fine. The text is sort of floating here. And instead of trying to do guesswork in the CSS file, you can use these debug tools to move the position and try to figure out where I want it to be.
Yeah, and there's also another layer to this. So for each thing, there's a thing called the z-index, which allows you to like place things on like a 3D plane. So if we change the z-index of the image to be lower than the z-index of the text, or if we change the z-index of the image to be higher than the z-index of the text, then we can just hide the text behind the image. And our browser automatically does this, and you can just like set it yourself manually.
Yep. So you could see Wally was saying that I was just fiddling around with styles in this debugger, and I was like, oh, that looks decently enough.
Yeah.
So I can then take these styles and I can put them into my CSS. So we got rid of the top here. We set a bottom of 20 pixels, a width of 100%. We text transform to make all the characters uppercase. So instead of writing about in all caps, we can have the styles do it for us. And that's actually better in many cases because that means screen readers won't read it as screaming. They'll read it as normal text. Specify some colors, some font sizes. You can actually specify it to be italic. There are tags that do that, but you could also do it in CSS without those italic tags. The italic tag is I or EM for emphasis.
Yeah, that gets really annoying if you have to do an italic bold for every single thing.
Yeah, so you could do it all in the CSS. So now I'm going to refresh this, and okay. So now about is on this image.
And you can see
And you
the
could
style that Mo made is now
and,
gone.
and now you can see there's an issue when we get a bit too small. But that looks fairly decent, quote unquote decent.
Responsive.
It's responsive.
Responsive.
Yeah. And works at various browsers. And we could go into media queries if we wanted to scare them, but that's really advanced CSS.
So like we say responsive. I know you get this is like a buzzword that gets thrown around, like everything should be responsive. That's the idea that a website needs to look the same, or needs to look nice on every single like browser, every single device that you use. And a lot of the CSS, like with media queries, is what's done for that. So let's say that your like the width is 300 pixels, like you're on a small phone. You would be given a different site. You'd be given a different style sheet than if you had the desktop.
Let's go into JavaScript. So the first thing I'm going to put in my JavaScript is an alert. And let's make sure I actually have the JavaScript. I always mess this one up as well. It's confusing because the CSS and the JavaScript are written differently.
Can't you also specify it's JavaScript?
Yeah, I actually could go. I could go a little.
You can do more.
I can do more if I wanted to wait for it to be after the page is loaded. This structure is basically saying wait until the page is loaded before we do anything. And if you were dependent on something like jQuery, you could specify that as a parameter. And then you could have jQuery available as a $sign here, but don't need to get too much into that. We're going to stick with our vanilla JS. And this is where you go to MDM and you look up a script tag, because apparently I don't know how to do that. One of the best things with MDM, just scroll down to the examples. Totally did that correctly.
Yeah, you just specify the type.
Not in HTML5.
Oh.
Did I save this in the right spot? Awkward. Well, I'll just move that to the header for now. That would probably work. It's probably because it doesn't have the boilerplate. There it is. Okay, so then when I load the page, I get an alert that says lol. And that can be a great way to annoy somebody if you put that in an infinite loop. You also have console functions. Your computer is going to run out of batteries.
Let me go get my
So if we were to open up the debugger and look at just the console, let me refresh this page. You notice I got log, info, warning. These are nice debug tools, and one of my favorite things to do is to go to people's websites, look if they display this type of information, and then use that to hack their site. Because a lot of times people forget to get rid of that information, and it just opens up like, this is how you break in. So we go to clinton.com. Her site's actually fairly decent. This is actually one of the coolest things they have is she puts her logo into the console and then says go to this if you want to like code for us. So that's actually really cool. That's one of the nicest things of her website. And if you were to go to, actually does jebbush.com redirect to, it used to redirect to Donald Trump's site. Nah, it looks like it doesn't anymore. Sorry to take you to Trump's site, but just to compare their infrastructure. Lots of errors being thrown here. Not very appealing. You could also take a look at sources. And you could find, this is how you actually find out what platform it was built on, and you could figure out, you could learn quite a lot just from doing that. You could also take a look at my favorite tab, the network tab. And I could see exactly the type of requests that are being made. And then I could filter those, and I could try to see what was this GET request, and then I could get information on this request. This is called advanced. And then sometimes you see they put passwords just directly into these requests, and that's where you could take them and then use them. And then you could make the requests yourself by changing the data and get back things that you shouldn't be able to access. So if you're really into that, learning web dev will really take you far into destroying people's lives.
The security portion.
The security aspect of cyber.
Cyber.
Yeah, he said that. So in here we have document. And then there's something called query selector all. And this is basically akin, if you've ever used jQuery, it's akin to doing this. Super hot. God, I can't type. So in jQuery it's this, but you can do it in vanilla JavaScript as well. And I'm going to grab that and I'm going to save it as a variable. And then, just to make sure I have the variable, I'm going to console log the object and see if I have it. So right now I don't have it. And the reason for that is because the JavaScript was defined before the site was ready. That's one of the biggest problems you have with JavaScript, is things get defined before sites are ready. So I believe this is all you need to do for that. I might be wrong though, because it's still in the head. Yeah, it is. Let's move that. Let's move that to the. Yeah. There it is. So now you could see why we moved the JavaScript to the bottom, because we weren't able to grab this information because it was loaded before the site was ready. But now the site is here. It's ready. So.
Is that also like ready on window load or something?
Yeah, that's something more jQuery. You have hooks. You have the DOM fires these events like when the page is ready, when the content's loaded. So you can actually hook into that in JavaScript and say, okay, when it's ready, do this. And in JavaScript, your comments are standard comment, comment. It's kind of what you're used to if you've ever done a typical programming language. So this structure here, you can kind of ignore it for now, but we're going to keep it. So we have the object. When I run this, there's the object. It's my super hot object. And you can see when I highlight it, it's highlighting the object that I selected for. What do we want to do? I want it so that when I click the object, something happens. OnClick equals function. And then I'm going to click. So before I put the functionality of what I want to just make sure that when I click it, is it actually registering the click? Did I do something wrong? So take small steps first. And right now, it's not doing anything, so you could tell I did something wrong. And the reason is because it's in a list, so I actually have to access the 0th element there. Perfect. Yeah. So this query selector all returns an array, and then from the array, I just get the 0th element. I should technically do a bounds check here. I'm not going to. But then I say when it's clicked, do this. So onClick is just an event that the browser fires off, that whenever something's clicked. So I'm saying when the browser detects I click this, run this code. So here I was just running, and you can see it's building up the number of times it's showing it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, how do I make it not do that? Oh, doesn't matter. So what do we want to do when I click this? What's something that we can do when I click this?
If it clicks, if you click it 12 times, I don't know, change the color,
Yeah, so we could change the color.
break the site.
Let's make it change the color. So we don't actually need to even look at the HTML anymore. We're done with that.
Super cool.
Super cool.
Yeah. Let's change it.
I believe it's just class, right? Let's just check this. Undefined. Actually, element, pass that in. Nope. O0. I don't actually remember the vanilla.js way to get the class.
Do you just want to?
Is it class name?
I don't know. Do you want to MDN?
Yep.
Okay.
And JavaScript class.
Get class.
I believe it. Yeah, element.className. I was close. I just can see that, and that's correct. Cool. That's great. We can actually override that. So what we were doing here, I want to do one quick thing just to make sure that works. Vanilla JavaScript is a little bit confusing for some people, which is why jQuery is often used. But basically, when I click this object, I got the class of the object, and I printed it, which is cooler paragraph, which is bold. So I'm going to try to remove that. I hope this actually works. It removed it. Notice it stopped being bold. So it was bold, but I clicked it. It actually removed the class. There's no class here anymore. See, it says cooler paragraph. I click it. I removed it. So that's something JavaScript can do to make your site a little interactive. But we're going to add a different class instead of removing it. I'm going to call it awesome. And we're going to make the font size 40 pixels. So plus equals, I'm going to put a space, awesome. Nice. But that was a little bit of a harsh transition. I clicked it and it just became big. But notice how all the thing the JavaScript's doing, you could define the styles manually in JavaScript. All I'm doing is adding these classes. And I'm keeping the styles in the CSS sheet. And that makes it easier for me to go back and edit the styles. It puts all the styles in one place. And that's pretty important.
Yeah, and there's also been a shift. You remember how, like in Huffington Post, how we saw the styles like within the browser instead of having it in separate CSS. People are starting to move it into JavaScript, so like you can just have your styles in JavaScript and then load it.
Yeah, so the idea is that you might have noticed you go on a page and then you have this ugly font and then a second later it like flashes and the font comes in. That's because they're using JavaScript to get the fonts later. Because if you're trying to get all the fonts and all of this data with one request, it's a very large request. So they give you the bare bones, this is all you need, and then they do JavaScript to make an asynchronous second request to get all the style sheets. That seems to be very popular. I don't quite like it because you get flashing on sites. And then if your internet's slow, you just don't get the content. But there's a bit of debate about it, but that's sort of the paradigm that they're going with. Here's a cool thing you can do with CSS. I don't want it to jump. I want it to smoothly transition. There are ways to do that. And I think WebKit might do it a bit differently.
Isn't it just transition?
Yep. And we want this to be applied to Superhot. So I'm going to specify a transition. I'm going to specify the transition will affect font size, and it's going to take 5 seconds. I could also do it in milliseconds if I want. And just to be certain, I'm not sure transition is fully supported by everybody, I'm going to define a WebKit transition. When you see styles like this with a hyphen in front of it, that usually means it's browser specific. And Chrome is built on WebKit, so is Safari. And most of your mobile browsers are also WebKit. Then there's like Mozilla, there's Opera, there's Microsoft has weird things. This is basically browser specific styling, which means transition by itself might not work on every browser. So there's actually CSS compilers that take your CSS, looks for things that are not implemented across browsers, and then puts in extra code that would make it for WebKit, make it for Opera, make it for all of this other stuff. So let's refresh this. And notice that was actually just the CSS was doing that. All the JavaScript did was change the class. The JavaScript didn't say make it bigger each. You could in JavaScript say, okay, every 200 millisecond step, change it by this amount. That's so much work. Make it easy on yourself. Put it in the styles and have fun with it. And if you remember the site that I was showing earlier with all the maps and you were hovering over things, you could specify hover styles also.
Yeah, do you want to add a hover?
Let's add a hover style. So, hover. Color, dark red. So when I hover it, but notice you could click this, but it's not a link. So when I'm hovering over it, this doesn't look like I can click it, right? It just looks like the standard, select text. So you can actually change that too by defining the
cursor.
Is it pointer or cursor?
I think it's cursor.
Yeah, it's cursor, pointer.
Yeah, you can also add, this is where the sparkles come in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could actually, if you're making a web application and you want to make it clear, you can click this, define that style. There's also ways in HTML which are a little bit better to say this is clickable because people with, again, vision impairment would not see the style. Then I click it and then I have fun. But then when you click it again, nothing happens. So I only want the cursor to show up when I first click it. I don't want it to show up again because now it's useless. So what you can do, remember we added this awesome class. You could define initial. Initial just says go back to whatever your initial thing should be. So notice now it's gone. I just have my standard, so it's not something I can click again. But actually, when I do keep clicking it, it is firing events in the console. So let's take a look at that. And that could be a problem too. You don't want to keep firing this event to add classes. Notice I keep firing it there. You only want it to fire when it's clickable. Once it's not clickable, stop firing it because you're just wasting browser resources. So we can be a little more specific in our query.
Yeah, and that's a theme within like most JavaScript. They are very resource heavy.
Not awesome. So we're adding the awesome class. I want to say target this element, but not if it's also this element. And that's a little more advanced. Oh, didn't actually fix it. My bad. Oh, I know why. It's because it grabs it the first time.
Yeah.
It doesn't refresh it. Refreshing it would actually take a little bit of time, but it doesn't quite matter. But you kind of get the point here.
Yeah.
So whenever you see anything that's super interactive, it's probably JavaScript. And the funny thing is you can disable JavaScript. And if you disable JavaScript on your phone, websites load much, much faster. And they also look 10 times worse.
Didn't you say like one of your clients had a 1 megabyte?
Yeah, I found a 1 megabyte JavaScript file with one of my clients, it was minified also, which I actually screamed. Like in the office, I was like, why is the site taking so long to load? And I look at it and I screamed, because this just shouldn't happen. I showed it to my coworker and we minified it and like, okay, we did a better minification of it. I was like, it's still like 600 kilobytes. It's just like, what is in it? Every library. So the thing is, you're adding library. You're like, oh, it would be cool to have this library. It'd be cool to have this library. You're affecting your site's load time. And if you're hosting your site on sort of a lower end infrastructure, like you just want a cheap host, you will notice it takes a while to load. Like this doesn't take any time to load because it's one, it's local, and two, it's very, very small. But you can run into problems if you're adding Bootstrap and like when you add Bootstrap, you should only pick the Bootstrap parts that you want instead of all of Bootstrap. Like if you're not going to have modals, don't put Bootstrap modal in it. Just pick, you want to cherry pick, I only need this part of it. Same with jQuery. Do you put all of jQuery and all of jQuery UI, or do you only put the parts of jQuery you need? And when you download Bootstrap, you actually have on their site the option saying, just give me this. Give me the grid system. I don't need the rest. So it's ways to optimize your site and make it a little better.
Yeah, and you're adding lines of code. So like 1 megabyte is, what is it, like 100,000 lines of code?
Yeah, I mean, it was all one line of code because it was minified. So minification is the process of taking this, removing all the white space, removing the white space, removing the comments, making it as small as possible because you don't need that. Same with this. Like you actually have, let's do CSS minifier. You can do it online.
Yeah, and a lot of like CSS compilers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll do this for you. So you can definitely specify like min.cs. So if you ever see like
check that out. Like this actually is less file size. It also is hard to read and hard to edit. So that's why we have compilers. Yeah, we have compilers for CSS and JavaScript, which are written in JavaScript. So the JavaScript compiler is written in JavaScript. Yay. That's actually not unusual. The GCC is written in C. So yeah. For sure, have fun with that.
Yeah, you see a bunch of talks on this. Like I know there are a lot of like JavaScript conferences where they talk about specifically about these compilers and like the advantage of like sass is like you can write code faster and you can just output it to all these like CSS. You can output it min CSS.
One thing that was annoying with the CSS is CSS has to be written like this, but if we were to make it less, or sass, let's do sass. Yeah. They're kind of the same thing. You can actually make it a lot easier to define. So you had main and main image. Okay. This is something that native CSS can't do, but they're pushing towards it, but you have other tools that can do it. That's actually a lot easier to read. And the compiler will make it what you saw, but basically you could say this is an image in main. That's so much easier to read. Look at this feature. We had like feature, okay, put the H2 stuff here. We don't need to define another line. It helps make it more contained also.
And you can also add like variables, that kind of thing. So if you have like padding, like let's say we have like 20 pixels that from the top for each like divider, you can just like set variables for like, oh, my divider will be 20 pixels, and you can set it across.
You could also set variables for colors, which is really useful if you want to keep a consistent color theme. And then if you have like just here's your 6 colors and you wanted to update it for Christmas time to your Christmas colors, you could just do it in one file, hit compile, it does it across everything. So that's why it exists. It's to make life easier.
Yeah, so we moved from the problem of just like, I need to change all the styles in all 1 million sheets to, like all I need to do to update this million sheets is just edit this one file. And now we're just like at the point where it's just like, now in order to edit this one file to change all my million sheets, I just need to change one line.
Yeah, we're really trying to make it easier on us, and a lot of the like here's another thing. I put and or an ampersand. Ampersand in less or sass is referencing the current scope, which would be super hot. So it's like okay, the current thing when I hover, and that's easier to read also. You tend to see this a lot. You see like a, and then you have hover, and then you have and link.
Child.
Yeah, and you have like all this other stuff. And another thing, you can write custom functions, which is nice, and you could also define percentages. So we define the percentage. So you could do a mix-in type function where it's, let's say I have a bunch of different elements that are very similar, but they have different colors. I can just do a mix-in function so that it will automatically put the color into the right class. Like if I needed like every other child or something, like you have a bunch of stuff you could do. You could do math. This is something you can't do. And this is actually better than just writing 75%. You could actually specify. Yeah, there's quite a lot you can do with it. Do we want to continue the slides or make more websites? Or
Let's look at what we have.
Beautiful.
Let's compare that.
It's the first one.
Okay. Do you want to show the footer or?
Yeah, we could add. We haven't actually added links, so let's add links. Let's do Font Awesome.
No. Oh yeah, Font Awesome 5's out.
Yeah, Font Awesome is, so let's say you want to have links to your Facebook, to your Twitter, to other stuff. You need to get the Facebook icon. You need to get a Twitter icon. You need to get all these other icons. Font Awesome is a font that has these icons. So you load one font, and you have, it's basically the text is rendered to show the Facebook logo, to show the Twitter logo. And nearly everything uses Font Awesome. You have spinners, you have so much stuff that's used with Font Awesome. Oh man, that bootstrap. Click on icons.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, all. So check it, like scroll down. You have all these different icons that you could use to represent different things you might need to show on a website. They have, Facebook. And because it's a font and not an image, it's a vector. So you could scale it to any size. So it's really quite nice.
Don't we have to make an account for this?
No, you can just... So let's get started with it. Let us click that Get Started button.
Yeah, they also host this, so you don't actually have to like send the image. You don't have to actually like host this image on your website that's already like...
And this is a big thing. Like if you're using jQuery, you could copy the jQuery file onto your server. Or you could just use the Google hosted one. Use the Google hosted one. Because almost certainly you have the Google hosted one already cached in your browser. So you just don't take any load time for that because you already have it.
Yeah, and then this is like, so with like AW, do you want to talk about like CloudFront and stuff? And just like
and a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
I think we were getting to that point. So let's
go back to this.
Oh my gosh. Let's, beautiful, beautiful. Let's get to... here. So you could download it, or they have...
Do they have a CDN?
They do have a CDN. Where is their CDN, actually? Oh, you do have to... wonder... Aww. I bet you could just find a link online. Thank you. Great. So there's Font Awesome. So no sign up. When you get that, you saw we had this link ref. We're going to do it again. Link G. And we're going to put the external, and rel is style sheet. And we have Font Awesome now. So if we load our site, right now we're not using it, but if you go to sources, you can confirm that you have it. And we do have it. We also have this WordPress. That's the image. So we do have Font Awesome here. Yay. How do you use Font Awesome? So once you get it, it's very easy. You just have to search like Facebook. Let's use the square one. You copy that line. We're going to put that in our footer. Refresh. And we have a little Facebook icon here. Now, it's not linking anywhere. It's not styled, but you have the Facebook icon. That's cool. So what if I wanted like a Twitter icon? I'm just going to...
Yeah, they also have different classes, so you can change the size to anything to like 2 times. And this is all in their documentation. So if you just like look up Font Awesome documentation.
So the way it works is the FA class is saying use the Font Awesome font. and then you say the type of font you want. The area hidden equals true is so screen readers will look at it and ignore it. Because otherwise, a screen reader would look at this I class and be like, it's italic text time. And that's not true. It's an icon. So area hidden is to help screen readers out. So we got that. That's great. And then we can go into our CSS and we can style it. So let's go to the footer. And I want just text align center, big font size, 40 pixels. Gorgeous. And because it's just text, if you wanted to customize the colors and the hover colors, it's just CSS for that. If you were to use an image, you'd have to get multiple other images, and then it's annoying, but you don't have to do that.
Yeah, so you could change the colors to reflect like Facebook's actual colors.
Yeah, so if you were to do i.fa Facebook official color, and I don't know what the Facebook blue
Just want
is.
to Google Facebook blue.
Facebook blue.
Ah, there we go.
Perfect, first result. I hope that's actually accurate.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh. You could close HuffPo. And then you want to get Twitter blue. And Twitter makes it not as fun. Okay, so Twitter's really being annoying by not giving me the color, and this is where, that's an image. This is where you go in and you just extract the color from the CSS. IFA Twitter color. Okay, yeah. That's looking pretty good. Looking pretty sharp.
Yeah, do you also want to make it like so you can also remember how we could change the cursor? You can also change the cursor so it like highlights.
Yeah, so what we want to do is actually put in the links.
So they
So do always put in the HTTP. You could do // but if you just do facebook.com, some web servers will try to go to your site at that page /facebook.com. That won't work. So sometimes when you get broken links, look in the URL and see if that's the case. And you can often fix it, but do specify that. And it's okay to not put HTTPS unless it's something that absolutely needs to be. Usually your browser will know to automatically switch anyway. So this actually probably will mess up our colors.
it's added an underline.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they do that. And then twitter.com. So we want to get rid of the, let's close the JavaScript. We want to get rid of that weird underline thing going on. Notice though when we hover it, it's good, and Font Awesome's made in such a way that the default link colors won't affect it if you specify a color. So if we want to get rid of that style, a text decoration none. Text decoration is what anchor tags do, so now that's gone, and when I click it, oh no, it's opening in the same page, but it's going elsewhere. That's not cool. How do you fix that? You specify a target, and you specify it to be blank. Now, depending on the browser you're using, this could mean a new tab or a new window. All modern browsers will make it a new tab. If you're on a phone, it'll be a new intent. You could specify a new window if you wanted to make it a pop-up. Don't do that, because nobody likes pop-ups. I remember a while back, though, this wasn't standardized. Now it is, but back when I was first doing HTML, it was not a standard. Yeah. So now you have your social links, and you could put them on your website with these really nice looking icons. I mean, you could make these huge. Like, if you really want to promote yourself, go into that footer, just 400. But notice how nicely it scales because it's a vector font, right? Oh, there it is. There it is. But yeah, notice how nicely these scale. They are vector fonts. They're not images. You won't get an image that can do that, unless it's an SVG, but this is better than that. So if you want to put your social stuff, you could do LinkedIn. You could do all your stuff for your like freshman C's website or even your personal website. It will look really nice, and it will link. And if you wanted the hover styles to be a little bit different here, you can also change that.
Yeah. So just using the exact same thing we saw, you just
Yeah.
add a hover, and then just change the color. You want to do that?
Well, the issue is we want to darken this, and default CSS doesn't have a darken. But
You could, can't you just like you can put the color in just into
You could change the opacity actually. So I'm gonna do it kind of in reverse.
What is that?
There's wind. So you could see it's kind of like a bit. Well, we're all here, so
Yell.
yeah. You can see it's a little faded out, but then when I hover on it, oh look, that's nice.
Do you want to promote yourself? Show them.
Yeah. So let's make that bigger. So you could see now, okay, I hovered on it, there's a visual like hook there that, oh, it changes. This is really cool for things you can click. You do want them to look a little different when you hover it. By default, anchor tags will look different, but if you were to change the styles, just take that into consideration. You don't want your anchor tag to look exactly the same as the rest of your text. That's more of a design thing. It's just a user hovering will see that and think, I can click that. Then if we go mobile, they break to their own until, yeah. Let's just make it the entire website. I mean, that should be your C site, is just your social media links. If you need a placeholder, you can do that. It's very easy if you want people to visit your LinkedIn.
Yep. All right.
Want to do the slides?
Yep. So let's go back. Let's see what this looks like now. To the original.
Oh, gorgeous.
Oh, look at those mountains. Text.
We didn't have the bold G, though. The G was different in GWTC. Let's do it. Also, let's get a better font because Times New Roman is really ugly. So let's specify a font family. So first we're going to do Helvetica. Then we're going to do Arial, and then sans serif. So the reason you specify things in order, if you have the Helvetica font, load it. If you don't, load Arial. And if you don't, default to sans serif. So, oh, that's so much better. Look at that. That's nice.
Comic Sans.
Comic Sans.
If
you have something that has a space in it, you have to put it in quotes. Do you have Comic Sans? Thank God. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay. So let's go. We wanted this G to be a little different. So go to the HTML. We would wrap the G in something called a span tag.
This is the less hacky way to do it than just putting a B, right?
Yeah. So if you wanted to style it with CSS, you put it in the span tag. So then it's in a span tag. You could give it a specific class, which we will. Equals original G. Yeah. The original G. And then we'll just add, you could have multiple CSS files also, not just one. Typically what you would do if you're compiling is you have multiple CSS files and compile it down into one. That way they only have to load one file. And then we'll do font size, just 72 pixels. There it is.
Yay.
Yay. So that's the less hacky way. You could, so in the HTML, you do have stuff like I could do manual bold tags. I can do manual emphasis tags. And you could see this was emphasized. Everything's bold, so you don't notice it here, but you could see sit on that was italics. This typically happens if you're making something like a WordPress site and the user is just putting in their comment and they're bolding it and italicizing it. So people who say you should never do it, that's not true. If you're doing anything with a WYSIWYG editor or any sort of content editor, it's going to come up. So yeah.
All right. So
the big G.
this is our beautiful
website.
Beautiful website.
Not quite as beautiful as when it had Comic Sans.
All right. So let's continue with the slides. So we showed you that Google is your friend. We had to Google some things. So where do you go from there? Hosting. So
I can't believe you left that joke in the slides. Cool.
of course. You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
All right. So DigitalOcean, there are a lot of different servers. You can use the C server, AWS, DigitalOcean. NC.me, that's just for students. You get a free domain, so recommend doing that. So if you have a domain and a server, you can specify, hey, you put up your index file, and then you can see it anywhere. DigitalOcean is kind of like your own server, so you can like SSH, and it's just like your own computer. like along with AWS and
Private server in built namespace if you want to be extra.
GitHub is hosting.
GitHub
Yeah,
has
GitHub
hosting
too.
also. So one thing to note, if you're looking to buy domain names, get started early because domain names. I have the problem of my name is Muhammad Abdul-Rahim, which is a very common name. So trying to find a domain name is literally suffering for me if it's just a personal site. But let's say you're going to make a company one day and you're like, I have a company. Once you come up with the name, get the domain names, check the domain names, make sure they're not taken. Like, you need people to visit your website. You need a website. And if you can get a .com and a .org, do it. If it's a personal site, though, just who cares?
Yep.
Some things you might have considered some of these really cool type of names where instead of .com or .me, it's like
.io.
Well, .io is fine, but it's like .whatever. Like if your name ends in a D and E and you get a .de for a German site, note that Google will not really give your search results to you unless you're in Germany. If you do that. So what's a name that ends in .de? Can I write on this?
Yeah.
Let's say your name was
J. Yeah.
So let's say this is, you're like, oh, that'd be a cool domain name. I'm J.de, and you hand a business code, and it's like, oh, cool. When you're searching for that, it's going to come up in Germany primarily. Google's will devalue that in America. Now, if it's a personal site and the only way people are getting to it is through your business card, who cares, right? But if you're doing like a company site, creative names like that, Google might have some issues with that. So things to take into consideration with SEO. Very, very, very long domain names people like to avoid, though I think nowadays it doesn't matter quite as much.
Yeah.
The ones that are typically global would be .com, .org, .io is now considered global, .me is considered global. There's a bunch of like weird new ones like
.ninja.
.ninja. If you know what this one is, congrats, but that's a new one you could also get. Anybody know what that is? I bet Victoria knows what that is. Yep, Victoria knows what that is. She's not happy with me. You can get a domain name for that.
What is?
Don't worry
All
about
right.
it.
All right.
I'm not going to go down that conversation.
Okay. And as students, you can leverage a lot of free stuff. So education, GitHub.compact. There are a lot of like editors. You can also get free hosting credits with DigitalOcean. Yeah. Uploading to the C server. So this was targeted towards like a lot of freshmen. I know you. Did you guys already have the talk about how to upload?
I know mine's already up.
Yeah. So this is one way. You could use SCP or you could use like FTP.
CyberDuck.
Yeah, CyberDuck.
Or-
Duck on your
if-
back.
Or if you really want to have it in Git, you could put a Git hook on your server and then just do a Git push.
Yeah.
Which is
So-
what I do for my stuff, is I set up remote so that I put all my code in version control. This is something I should show.
So this is why Git and like version control systems are awesome, because let's say you don't want to keep pushing the exact same changes again and again and again every time you change the site. So you can just use Git, push it to somewhere else, push it to like their server, and then instead of uploading it, you just sign in or like log on to the to like the server. Then you just type git pull, and then it takes the latest like version of the website and keeps it up there.
And another way, instead of logging into a server and Git pull, you actually can just go into the server once, configure it so that when you get pushed to it, it will automatically pull.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't have a good example right now on my computer, but I can get one up if you give me a sec. Keep going though. It'll
Okay.
take a while.
So where do we go from here? You already saw we already had some JavaScript. We already had some JavaScript, have a backend for web applications. So I know like a lot of things like if you guys have heard Django, you have like a Python backend, and that would just like do all the processing of the data, and then you display it through like JavaScript and HTML, and then you can like create templates. That's how like Amazon will do it. So that's
So this kind of goes down to something called the model view controller, which is where when you're doing like business and professional stuff, this is. So the idea here is if
Do you
you
want to pull up MVC?
No,
Okay.
if you just remember from our earlier, we were writing the HTML directly into an HTML file, and that was fine. But in a normal model view controller, what you would have is you would have a template file,
and the template file doesn't have any data in it. It's just the template. You'd have a different file that's just the data. And so that way the template's reusable and the data is all in just one place. So in the template, you specify this field goes here. And that's kind of the paradigm people go with nowadays. If you're using PHP, there's something called Timber or Twig, which integrates with WordPress. If you're using Python, Django is a model view controller.
Yeah.
There's Laravel. There's so many other things if you want to go down the path of web dev.
And they all do basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So
There's an argument on which server-side language. Like, we were only covering the front-end stuff, but there's a whole world of server-side languages. Like, PHP is it's its own beast.
yeah, Rails apps are
oh
popular.
God.
Have you used Rails?
Yes, I've used them all. It's a nightmare.
Yep. So
PHP tends to be the most consistent one I found.
So improving your workflow, we already showed you like an example sass file. React, that's when you have you can there's been a shift where you use React to load in styles from JavaScript. So then you just add in styles. I know you said that just depending on the paradigm you want to follow. Bootstrap, CSS modules, Electron. So Electron was used to make Slack. So when you were talking back at the start, Slack was made once, and you can display it. The display is consistent across browsers because of Electron, because they're using Webdeck. That's it.
A lot of people do it nowadays because the view they want to achieve is not a native view; it's a custom view. So the only thing they need native is the window, which they can just have a window be a web browser, and they just use a WebKit web browser, so it's consistent across everything.
Yep. And then speed. So when Mo was talking about putting the scripts at the bottom, there's actually a really cool article on rules to having a fast site. You can also use Google's developers speed. So that tells you, hey, is my website fast? How can I improve it? Should I make the images smaller? Is my JavaScript just really, really large? Should I minify it? Then you also have a web page test, which does the exact same thing. And then you have more rules. So
My recommendation for a lot of these higher advanced tools exist because I work on a daily basis with sites that have 8,000 plus pages. I need to there's so much database querying and all of that I need to take these paradigms into consideration. For a personal website, the kind of popular design flow nowadays is just a one-page site.
Yeah.
There's been phases of web design where previously it was never scroll. If you scroll on your site, it's bad. And then phones came out and they're like, we really can't do that. So then scrolling became popular. Now it says never click. If you have to click to go to another page for more information, no, just don't do that. So it's it keeps changing every 4 years.
Yeah.
Now the big thing is flat design because of Apple.
yeah, Apple, Google, their material design.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, much better than the Space Jam site.
All right.
It's great when you look at sites that still have the older design, Drudge Report is still using it. God, it's a gorgeous looking website. Just take a look. Yeah, beautiful. Just scroll down. It really has not changed its look at all, and it's one of the most popular websites for politics.
Jesus.
There's something called oh,
Look at that hover.
dude, it's great. It's possible if they link to your personal site that your site will go down because your server's just not prepared for the amount of traffic it's about to get. So just hope your site. So that happens with Reddit as well, but it happens especially with Drudge. If Drudge ever, I don't know what you would possibly be doing to appear on Drudge Report, but if you do, and they link to your site's going down.
So
Why is it like this?
Because it was made by one guy and he hasn't changed it.
Why isn't that popular?
Because this guy's opinion. Okay, this guy was technically the person who broke the story with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and he's just been there the entire. It's just an aggregate of different. This guy makes so much money. This site gets so much traffic. It's insane.
it's so weird.
That's why I was saying when I was messing with Huffington Post's front page and got rid of the header, I'm like, oh, it looks like Drudge Report now because it does. Like, look at the source. Go back to the source for a second. Look at that. I swear he's like, it's the capital A, the capital F. Those are old styles where you had to capitalize it in the past. Like, this has not changed since the 90s. But it's still so popular.
Yep. So, any questions? So we're done with the PowerPoint.
I would not recommend going to that site in your free time.
The judge report. Do you?
Don't do it.
Alright.
Do you want to do some hacking stuff?
Sure. You want to go first?
My favorite. This is not web dev. This is just using the network tab to have fun stuff. So, do you know what TriviaGo is? It's like for finding hotels. This is something my roommate, Trivago, yeah, sorry. Their site is built pretty terribly. So notice how long this is taking to load. Now it loaded. What happened there? This request right here happened. Gives me a request URL. Now they don't have a public API. That's what they claim, that they don't have a public API. But I looked through the network tab and they do have a public API. And then from that, I would like, if I wanted to build a service that just used TriviaGo's network and used their information, but I displayed it in my way, I actually can do that. And that's something I've been helping my suite mate build, which he's selling in Korea. It's like, yeah, because all of their API, they claim, oh, it's not public, no public API, except they're just using GET requests. And you have the request available in browser. So you can just look at the request and figure out, like, let's do Annapolis, Maryland. So wait for it, requests appeared. Okay, let's take a look. Let's take a look at XHR. We don't want images, we don't care about that. Now check that out. Take a look at the URL here. Now the request header actually got cut off. This one. This has a full request header. Let's go here. Okay, so it returned a bunch of information. It's kind of hard to read it this way though, right?
You want to expand it?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is, in the console, this is just a JSON object. So now I have the object. And now it's much easier for me to expand it. And I can take a look at what they have here. Okay, so this one is kind of what I want and has 46 hotels. What can I get out of that? There's other requests that parse this on the site. Then I can use my information that I obtained just from looking at this, such as this ID. Hey, Jungyoon, guess what I'm doing? Trivago?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is my roommate, who I was mentioning earlier, who was asked for some help here, where we were looking at request headers. And what we had here, when you made the request, is I actually can get the ID of that's attributed to this particular location for Annapolis. And then I could go here, I could change, nice. I could change some of these parameters. This is a pretty big string, but there's something called Postman.
Oh, I do have that.
You do have Postman? Let's open up Postman. Postman is just a way to make these requests easier. So you could, I guess you were working with Uber recently.
Oh yeah, that was last week.
Yeah, this is from the hackathon.
Yeah. See ya.
You're welcome.
So let's make a new one. Enter request URL. So this is also their cached system, right? So if I get rid of their cache, yeah. So this is their live uncached, which means it should be their latest data. So let's go to Postman. Did I?
Wait, yeah,
What?
it's alt space.
That's what I did. It's not command.
No.
Anyway, so let's get rid of this flags parameter.
Do you want to explain what a REST API is?
You can do that.
Yeah, so REST API, it just has like, it just structured data. So if you send like a, so this is like a GET request, if you go to like a certain link, they'll return this data, so like JSON data, for example.
So if we're looking at the parameters in the URL, there's flags. So this is just a basic, no, it's not even authorization header. So there's flags. We'll keep that 27. There's this key, which is Q, which is the query. So I could do Annapolis, Maryland. And then I'm going to send that.
And this is how you interact with most APIs right now. So
And it looks
like
like it's
Uber.
giving me like Nevada and New York and stuff. So, oh, I need to escape this. Yeah. 2C, %20. That's still having some issue.
Make it
Two-
Maryland instead of empty.
No, it was 274, not 27. I misread. So actually, I think it automatically will escape it. Oh, it suggests concepts. This needs to be get. Oh, sorry, my bad. I defined it in the wrong spot. So flags, 274, another flag, Q, Annapolis, Maryland. There we go. So now I have the information, and you could see with Postman, it's so much easier to take a look at what the data returned is, right? And then I could go back to the params, and you could see it showed up here in the request, but you can edit these somewhere. Oh, it gives you the cookies too. Cool. Why isn't it actually showing me the parameters like it did before? That's interesting. Let me close that. I haven't used this in a while, so forgive me for being a little confused. So flags, 274. And if I wanted to do a different location, I can do DC. Get all the information on that. There's a bunch of stuff. And then I could use this to then factor into a different request, which will give me exact hotel data and prices. So you could kind of see how just sort of using just this network tab, using just that, you're able to get quite a lot. Just make sure when you're doing it, look for XHR, which would be like the type of requests. You don't look for like JavaScript or CSS or anything like that. I mean, unless you're looking specifically for the images that are loaded. But it tells you quite a lot for any site, and it actually brings security back into question because any request that a site's making is in your browser, which means you have access to it, which means security is important. I don't even think, do they not have an SSL certificate? Yeah, there's also that, so that's a problem. So if it was like secured, you wouldn't be able to do this, but sometimes you can get away with things. That's pretty fun. You can also, using Postman, you can, instead of going to like, if you have a WordPress site, instead of going to WordPress, making the content in the editor, you can actually just send a request to WordPress, and if you pass all the authorization correctly, it will make the post. Which means if whoever set up that WordPress site did not do a good job, you can do an attack vector and gain complete control of the site. Which is, it's quite fun.
Have you done this?
Yes.
All right. Well, this is the Web Dev Workshop. Thanks for
showing up.
showing up, guys.